Let's now move on to our third main topic today. Chris, what is our third main topic today?
This is from Nicholas Mettner. Hello, everyone. One of the most anticipated movies of the year is It Chapter 2. The first one was amazing, and the trailers for the new one have been crazy. Just saw a report that says the movie is going to be almost 3 hours. I'm a little worried because is this just more for the sake of more? The last one was just 2 hours and 15 minutes and had an awesome pace to it. Are they getting carried away with this runtime? Thanks. So a potentially 3-hour runtime, how do you feel about that?
Look, whenever you hear movies getting close to 3 hours, that's got to give you a little bit of pause. You know, it's got to give you a little bit of pause. Because there are some people that simply will not go to a movie if it's 3 hours or close to 3 hours long. And sometimes, you know, one of my, I enjoyed Once Upon a Time in Hollywood. I did. But one of my criticisms of was that at 2 hours and 45 minutes, that movie was too long for that movie. Like that movie should have been closer to 2 hours. And there are other movies that should be closer to 3 hours and what have you. Like you pointed out, the first It was 2 hours and 15 minutes. That movie has a terrific pace. Just a beautiful pacing to it. That 2 hours and 15 minutes, that even though that's a little long, it felt perfect for it. The reports right now are that It Chapter 2 is going to come in closer to 3 hours at 2 hours and 45 minutes. Is that just adding more for the sake of more? Well, the director of It and It Chapter 2, Andy Muschietti, was talking about that, and here's what he had to say about the situation. He said this: at the beginning, when you're writing and building the beats of the story, everything that you put in there seems very essential to the story. However, when you have the movie finally edited and it's 4 hours long, you realize that some of the events can easily be lifted, but the essence of the story remains intact. You cannot deliver a 4-hour movie because people will start to feel uncomfortable no matter what they see. But we ended up having a movie that is 2 hours and 45 minutes, and the pacing is very good. Nobody, talking about some test screenings they did and the executives that they showed to, nobody who's seen the movie has had any complaint about a 2 hour and 45 minute runtime. And to me, Rob, that's the key thing. You know, we're always talking about there's no such thing as what's the right runtime for a movie. The question is, what's the right runtime for that movie? Some movies are best at 90 minutes. Some movies are best at 2 hours and 30 minutes. Endgame came in at a breakneck 3 hours and change things. It's about finding the right runtime for your movie. And while I agree that off the top, like you think the first one was 2:15 and it was perfect, why go 2:45? Well, I think the director gives his answer. It's got a great pace to it, even at 2:45, and we've shown it to people and nobody's commenting on the runtime at this point. So to me, that's good enough to say, I accept what Andy's saying. If he thinks this still maintains good pace and nobody's mentioned anything about it, then maybe 2:45 is the right runtime for this, just as 2:15 was the right runtime for the first one. But I don't know, Rob. A movie like this, you know, because I've heard a number of horror people say, you know, horror films shouldn't run too long. I've heard other people, you know, in horror films who are bigger horror films fans than I am, say something like that. But you're seeing this 2:45 for It Chapter 2. Good idea, bad idea? What do you think?
Well, I think movies are kind of like wizards in the Lord of the Rings trilogy. They're as long as they should be. Like wizards arrive, they're never late. You know, they arrive just when they should. And I think, look, if you like It Chapter 1 and it works for you, why do you suddenly think that the people who made that movie, who have also made It Chapter 2, are going to screw you? They're going to deliver the goods. They're going to give you what you want. I don't know if you read the book. I read that book when it first came out. I spent the summer of '86, the latter half of. It came out in '86. I read that whole book. It's a huge book. It's just got gigantic amounts of story. And now you're going to see the Losers Club, both as kids and adults, kind of like, but more so. And I just think the story is going to move at a breakneck pace. I think, John, you and I saw an extended scene that they touch on in the trailer. So good. That scene alone, I'm like, give me 3 hours of that. And I think It Chapter 2 is going to be, I liked the first film. I didn't love it. But just that scene that we saw at CinemaCon, I'm like, I am more excited than ever to see this movie. I cannot wait. I think we're in for a treat. It is going to be the return of the king of horror films, probably. And I'm excited.
And the trailers for it, the most recent trailer too. I said this on my show this weekend. I think the most recent trailer for It Chapter 2, I think is my favorite horror movie trailer I've ever seen. I just love that trailer. Anyway, Chris, you're hearing about this movie, you know, 2 hours and 45 minutes. We just had some big discussions this past year about runtime of movies when we knew Endgame was coming in close to 3. For a horror movie like an It, or in this case, It Chapter 2, is 2:45 too long, or do you think it can work perfectly fine at that length?
I feel like, and I'm saying this as somebody who is not a fan of the horror genre, that runtime totally makes sense. I mean, we've already learned that this is going to be one of the bloodiest movies in history.
Yeah, they talk a lot about
They've talked so much about how this is going to be insanely violent. There's going to be more time needed to fit all of that violence and, grotesque stuff happening. We also are having, like Rob was saying, the Losers Club, both past and present. We're covering more of their history.
That's true.
That book is so dense. There is so much history of what happens in Derry that we're getting a lot more of supposedly in this one. So an extra 30 minutes, that completely makes sense to me. And like you were saying, why would we distrust them now? It Chapter 1 was really, really well received. And if you're a Stephen King fan, this adaptation was so well done. So, of course, if we're getting more of the book stuff in there, it's going to work.
The one thing that does make me a little worried sometimes is that when a director makes a first film and it turns out to be successful, well, then the studio will give him more rope. Mm-hmm. And sometimes I think a director gets tempted to become a little bit self-indulgent and maybe putting a little bit more stuff in there than they need to. But to me, it's all about the pacing of the movie. If at 2 hours, 45 minutes, it maintains a good pace, I'm good with that. Question is, guys, what do you think about that? The whole notion that this film's going to come in closer to 3 hours than 2. Do you think that's too long? Do you think it could be perfect for it? Do you not really care one way or the other? Jump down to the comment section below and let us know your thoughts. All right.